Let's go!
This has been a topic I've been wanting to really talk about for a long time. And we sort of briefly glossed over it on the casual conversation, like what the hell is a casual? And I sort of talked about how my space in past like 10, 15 years of being a part of the fighting game community and just fandom of fighting games is not to get people from being advanced to pro players or even intermediate to advanced players. What I'm getting at is that has deeply changed my relationship with fighting games in general. Not to mention the fact that it isn't me trying to get you into only the thing that I love. Even though I could not become the best Xrd player, clearly, that was a game that I wanted to show people that maybe I can bridge the gap for you, you know? Maybe I can help you get from one spot to the next. And that felt really good. That making people try to get into this stuff in some way feels really good, instead of just making them become high-skilled players to even higher skilled players. That boils down my perspective of fighting games changing a lot. And this is where the topic of this video is. Fighting games need to be good video games. And I don't mean that fighting game content overall, that's kind of a different thing. Having enough casual content to keep people in, like good story modes and good arcade modes and good tutorials and all that kind of stuff. The way I engage with this medium has changed a lot, especially when developers are proposing new concepts and new ideas to you. I think that there are some issues with a lot of fighting games where if that game in the first few rounds has not directly communicated to the player, this stuff is cool, that there is a cool thing that you get to do in this game and have fun with that is effectively different or similar to other games that may have been really interesting before. Fighting games need to be good ass video games, my dude. Even if anybody's jumping into this and they're like, damn, look at that, I want to play that shit, in the exact same ways that fighting games engaged people back in the arcades in the 90s. That has not changed. Even Street Fighter 6 in the first hour, I had some criticisms of the first hour, but I could not be bothered by any of some of those criticisms because visually captivating, all this crazy slow-mo, all these moments, all this build-up. The first time I played Street Fighter 6 was ridiculously impressive. And until I played people that really showed me how to use mechanics within a couple of hours, it opened up even more. It was like, whoa, this isn't just Street Fighter 5 2. This is a lot more. This is a lot bigger of a game that builds on that foundation. It grew within my first day playtime. What I'm getting at is that all of these crazy in-depth mechanics and cool things and all the stuff that gets put into fighting games, if that stuff doesn't become obvious that this is super cool within the first 30 minutes of you playing the game, within the first few rounds of you playing the game, then I think that game is sort of like failed. Its design as a game, just in general, just as a normal video game that engages the audience, I fall off really hard. Just in general, dude. This doesn't even apply to fighting games. It applies to like all games in general. Like if this game doesn't hook me early on, then then something about it just isn't gonna do for me. Even Tekken 8 and its crazy ass, insanely oppressive gimmicks and shit was proposing some pretty crazy ideas. Visually, that game was looking a lot different than the other Tekkens. What characters were doing was much more fantastical than a lot of the shit the other characters are doing. It was pushing the Tekken 7 aspects way further. So visually speaking, it was like, damn, this game's crazy, dude. This Tekken 8 game is crazy. Maybe we gotta tone it down a little bit, but it's kind of nuts that we gave characters even more things than they've ever had. That was, I won't lie, pretty appealing. So that grabbed me with something. It got its hooks in me. That's the spot that I am the most captivated by fighting games in general. That's the spot where I feel like I am the most critical of fighting games. And I'm able to communicate that to developers over the years when I play early builds of things, of whatever games it might be over the past like 5 to, 8 years of being in this situation. If there's something about this game that doesn't grab me like immediately, I can communicate what's not doing it. Is it the hit stun? Is it the pushback? Is it the fact that specials don't feel special enough? Is it the fact that supers don't feel unique or special enough? Is it the fact that things are too long? Like all that kind of stuff. I think it is exemplary in fighting games. In the fighting game genre, in the fighting game aspect, I think it is way harsher that if that fighting game doesn't do something visually captivating, immediately appealing, I want to try this, I want to play that, wow, that looks so cool. If it doesn't give you some sort of like childlike wonder in the first like few minutes of you just even witnessing its existence, then I feel like it's going to be very hard for that game to engage a larger audience, like straight up. It's going to be a lot more difficult for that game to find an audience, to discover people, to discover new players, or really engage with people that are not just hardcore fighting game folks. That is my perspective on fighting games. That's where I'm coming from in every regard now. Now my entire focus is not as wide as it used to be, where it's just like, oh man, is this just going to be a great game for hardcores and a great game for casuals? Does this game even functionally serve its purpose as a video game? Does it even feel really good as a game? I'm sorry, I hate to use the example of the Bleach game. Granted, it's probably great in many ways and people really like it. My dude, the movement felt incredibly bad. Just moving around with characters and like pressing buttons felt really bad. My ability to make a connection in that game was really difficult because it was the antithesis of some of the things that I really enjoy. I'm not even talking about the depth of gameplay. It felt heavy, dude. Like anything they're proposing to me that's coming after that is coming at the behest of this big issue right at the forefront. And it's like, yeah, you can learn to get better at that. You can learn to get way better at these things, but that's always going to be there. To be honest, this has been a criticism I've had with several games from like the Injustice series, Injustice 2 especially, from MK11 right at the start. Even Mortal Kombat 1 has a lot of issues, even though it proposes a lot of really fun stuff. I got into MK1 because I'm a hardcore fighting game guy, and they do some really cool hardcore fighting game things in that game, especially now. But it ultimately fails at a first impression because just doing the most basic thing, like calling your assist to help you in attacking, feels bad. Fighting and pressing buttons and jumping and pressing feels kind of rough, even compared to the other NRS games, which kind of have a barrier of entry of this sort of feels rough to get into, you know? That's really where my ass comes in and starts having a lot of opinions. I start to get very critical of my opinions on how things feel, even at the beginning of Guilty Gear Strive, with how they were approaching previous Guilty Gears going into the new one, even though there was a lot of really fun stuff in that shit. My ass comes from a very critical reception of just how does this game feel as a game to new players? How does it feel just to press buttons and do things? And does it propose new, crazy, engaging ways to do that just in general? And it feels like in some situations, like a whole bunch of games are sort of like scared of doing that stuff at the time, scared to try new crazy ideas, scared to try different things. And in my opinion, it's what makes fighting games great. Proposing that a game in general just has a great competitive high level. I think Mortal Kombat 1 is the best example of that because I've spent a lot of time with the game. Proposing that actually the high level of this game is really cool, but you got to get through all of this crazy bullshit to get there. You're going to have to get through all of this really aggressive feeling problems before you get there. And it's like, yeah, man, that's really difficult. It's really difficult to sell somebody on this when you know that they have to go through the learning process of just like, I got to put up with this shit, bro. That's my kind of big take on fighting games and how first impressions in fighting games are really important. How about DNF Duel? The best example, dude. DNF Duel proposed the coolest idea ever. Mega powerful specials. So everyone was big loving that game at the start. In the first betas, everyone was big loving it until we realized that actually you just have to hold all this shit because the mobility is ass. And that was already a criticism that we had at the beginning, that, man, running feels bad. Why does the movement feel like shit when everything else feels so much fun? Like, what is happening? So yes, like from the very beginning of DNF Duel, that felt like a game that should have been moving at twice the speed, but they had attacks and all this big crazy shit that was huge, and it felt like we're in a Marvel versus Capcom. Every character's Virgil and shit, but nobody can move around. It was kind of a big problem. We gave that game credit because it did feel good to do those things with really big, powerful moves and specials, but it clearly had an issue. That's kind of the thing. I will be the most critical with fighting games, is this game promoting something interesting and cool and engaging? Or is it just sort of like being very careful? Is it being very esports, you know? That could be kind of a thing that we realize now that, man, the games are trying to be a little bit too safe. Sometimes we just gotta let it rock. Sometimes like maybe intentionally putting dirt into a game isn't maybe as generally fascinating as discovering dirt. Personally speaking, games like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 were not designed to have dirt. They gave characters a lot of powerful tools, but what people eventually found out and how good it was discovered by players. People figured out how gross some of that game could be. Plank dashing was not intentional. Characters having infinite hit stun on some moves while the rest of the roster follows a rule set that maybe some characters don't apply to, that was not intentional, dude. So much of that stuff was not designed to be that way. Players discovered that stuff. Players figured that shit out. And that discovery is what made that game fascinating. It's what made that game cool. That's why I deeply feel that first impressions of fighting games is sort of a thing that I feel like I have a little bit of an expertise in that situation, and just identifying that this game's gonna pop off, bro. You can see why any rando and even any hardcore fighting game fan is gonna look at that shit and go, damn, I'm into this shit.